Hi BookTube, and welcome to a new video. This is another tag video. This is the Reading the Humanities tag, which is originated by Richardson Reads, and I was tagged by Elizabeth at Bookish North. And originally I'd seen this tag going around, which is why I'm not going to tag anyone at the end, because I think most people have done it. So I sort of was watching a few and I thought, I can't answer these, but Elizabeth's answers sort of inspired me to think sort of slightly out of the box. So it's a slightly confusing tag, and it seems to be asking for a mix of fiction and non-fiction, but I've taken the decision, where possible, I'm going to give answers that are fiction only, although there's a couple of cases where that's simply not possible. Okay, so first prompt. Name a book or author who uses the field of or concepts from anthropology in their work. Well, I'm going to go with Dark Eden by Chris Beckett, which is the first in a trilogy, which I buddy read with Celia last year. Now, the anthropology here is slightly inverted in that a space crew of about 5 humans, which obviously is sort of contemporaneous with us, or slightly in the future of us, because they can sort of cross greater distances of the universe. They crash land on this virgin planet, which has no metal, no technology. It is purely a sort of return to nature, and a very strange nature it is. So 3 of them decide they can't live like that, so they're going to try and get the spaceship or shuttle going again and fly off and bring rescue. Whereas the other 2 sort of make peace with their fate and decide they are going to stick it out, and they become the parents of the future race. But it is a primitive race because they don't have the technology, don't have access to metal. And also, due to inbreeding, some of them are, have sort of physical deformities. But the anthropology bit comes in that, several generations after the original founding parents in this primitive tribe, they have lots of rituals around, the few things sort of recovered from their original ancestors. So the woman's ring becomes a fetish object. They have a pile of stones which marks what they believe is where the returning craft will come and rescue them. There are some toys, sort of wooden crafted toys that the original couple either had or made, I can't remember now. So these are a bit like sort of cargo cults, which is very much an anthropological concept. So the book itself was fantastic on its anthropology. It's fantastic on its world building in terms of its nature building. Where it let me down was its relationships between the characters. I thought were a bit basic, a bit primitive, to coin a word. Anyway, prompt 2, a book or author who uses archaeology in their works. Well, I can't lay my hands on it, but this is the Republic of Consciousness joint winner from this year, called Lucia by Alex Phoebe, which is a book about James Joyce's daughter, Lucia Joyce, who suffered from mental affliction. And the book, we don't know much about her. She's sort of been erased from history, deliberately probably by the Joyce family. And this book is a fictional sort of treatment of trying to sort of, discover her. So, things like, how she was treated within the various institutions she found herself in. And it's a brilliant book, and I think a worthy winner or joint winner of the Republic of Consciousness Prize. But where the archaeology comes in is interspersed with each section on Lucia is a expedition into an Egyptian tomb where there is the sarcophagus of a female Egyptian. And so it sort of parallels Lucia being erased with the fate of this sarcophagus and the mummy wrapped up inside of it. And in a way, I actually found the Egyptian bits, because they were more coherent, they were more of a story that came together. I found them more pleasing and satisfying than the Lucia bits, because Lucia remains fragmented and erased and sort of undiscovered, which I think was Phoebe's point. But in the way he's written it, you don't find out that much more. Prompt 3. Have you ever read a work from ancient Greece or Rome? If so, what was it? And do you have a favourite author of work? Okay, well, when I was studying at college, I did a paper on the history of political thought, and there was one early political thinkers and one late. And I did the early, so I studied Plato and Aristotle. Funnily enough, my tutor back then was Oliver Letwin, who is now and has been for a long time a British MP in the House of Commons, and he's the guy who sort of helped Parliament take over trying to sort of sort out the Brexit mess when the Prime Minister Theresa May failed to do. Anyway, that's by the by. So yes, Plato and Aristotle. So I read The Public, I read by Plato, I read Poetics by Aristotle, and some others. And I recently did, on my BookTube channel, and I'll post a link to it, a rap battle between Aristotle and Plato for who's the daddy of ancient Greek philosophy. And if you can't be bothered to watch, I'm Plato all the way through. Prompt 4, history. Do you have a favourite historical period you enjoy reading about? If so, what is it? Any books that stand out? Well, I don't like historical fiction on the whole, for reasons that I explain in a video, which again I'll post the link to. I studied history at university, and I'm pleased to say that the two periods of history I'm most interested in since I left university, I never studied at university, and the thing is, you can't say that you enjoy reading about them. I think I'm obsessed. I have a mania for these two subjects. And one is the Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, and the other is the two wars in Chechnya, trying to gain independence from Russia. So I read both fiction and non-fiction. So to give you an idea of my obsession with Cambodia, so there's two books by William Shawcross, who's a master of his material on Cambodia. This is Sideshow, which is sort of Kissinger, Nixon and the destruction of Cambodia. So that's the American high politics. This is The Quality of Mercy, which is much more from the sort of Cambodian point of view. And then a couple of novels, Madelaine Thien, Dogs at the Perimeter, which I think was her first novel, and very good it is too. And this rather wonderful experimental book called Cambodia, a book for people who find television too slow. And on Chechnya, I only brought one up. This is the rather wonderful novel by Anthony Marra called A Constellation of Vital Phenomena, one of Sean Mooney's tip-top recommendations. I read last year, Buddy Reed with Curtis, books and films, 5-star read. And a couple of non-fiction, again, I haven't brought up, one is Sniper by Nikolai Lilin, who was a Russian sniper in a special forces brigade in the Chechen War. One of them, I can't remember which one. And German Sedulive, I Am Chechen. So again, from the other side. 5. Linguistic or languages. Reading is about language, amongst other things. What is your favourite translated work of fiction? Well, does it say? Of literature, sorry. Well, not only is it translated, but it's also about language. This is called The Seventh Functional Language by Laurent Binet, his second novel, and my book of the year of 2017. I shall post the link to my full review of it, but this is genius. It's about semiotics and stuff that the French are obsessed with and the British seem completely ignorant of. But it's wonderful. Very funny book as well as very, sort of chock full of ideas. 8. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. Is it? I'm not sure it is. Not to me it is, and it's about trying to work out the nature of reality and who we are and all that sort of stuff. Have you read work of philosophy? Do you have a favourite? I neglected to bring this upstairs with me from the shed. But yeah, so I read a lot of philosophy in my 20s. I started off with Bertrand Russell's A History of Western Philosophy, which is a thick book, but a really good, accessible introduction. And then there were certain philosophers that I came across there that I went and read further. So Heidegger, Wittgenstein, the existentialists, A.J. Ayer and logical positivism. I'd read Marx, Sartre's sort of being and nothingness, about which I can remember nothing. And one of I studied at college again in that history of political thought. I studied Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, which is one of my favourite works of philosopher and still sort of holds true today, where he sort of says life, or man's life, is nasty, brutish and short, and Hobbes' argument stems from there, in that therefore we have to have a powerful state to stop us tearing each other apart. Bit on the fascistic side, but you've got to allow for times in which it was written where it predates fascism. John Locke, John Stuart Mill. I mean, I read all these guys. And I'd sort of given up on philosophy. But recently, Neil Griffiths' channel, Neil recommended Galen Strawson, Things That Bother Me, which I read last year and was superb. didn't quite reignite my love of philosophy, because in a way it sort of stated a lot, brought together a lot of stuff that was already out there in the history of philosophy, but it brought it together beautifully. But irony of ironies, my current work in progress is all about philosophy, so go figure. 9, religion. Name a book or author that you have read that's influenced your own personal view of religion. Well, you know, Revolutionary Government by the anarchist Peter Kropotkin and Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, another anarchist thinker. I can't say they influenced my view of religion. I'd sort of come to my own conclusions that I was a non-believer, but, you know, I'm asked for books. Here are 2 books, give you an idea. 10, performing arts, musicology, theatre and dance often put the performer front and centre. Do you have a favourite performer? If so, who is it? And why do you appreciate their work? Is there a book about this performer? Well, I'm going to look at one in musicology and one in dance. So dance, I don't have a favourite performer, but my favourite form of dance is classical Indian dance, because unlike ballet, it's quite angular, whereas ballet is more sort of flowing and smooth. But I like angular bodies in motion, I think, more than sort of flowing. But also Indian dance, or a lot of Indian dance, the dancer has to make the music and keep the rhythm. And he keeps the rhythm by the susurrations from his mouth, and the music and the rhythm by the bells that they tie on their ankles. So as their feet are moving, these bells. And it's just, you know, they are a master of so many different trades. But what I particularly like about Indian dance, is, you know, the problem with sort of going to watch dance for me is, you know, I don't understand the storyline. You know, I can't interpret what's going on, what story is being told. I just sort of appreciate the shapes of the bodies and the movement and things like that. But in Indian dance, they have all these finger gestures, and they correspond, you know, so many different gestures correspond to specific words. So they are literally telling a story. Now, I can't admit that I know what those gestures signify, what the words are, and what the story they're telling, but I appreciate that they are telling a story. So I don't know how well in focus this is. It's a bit of guesswork, but this is you know, an example of some of the different finger gestures, and each one of these will have a specific meaning. So I wonder if I can find any of them. So there's one called Musti. Can I find Musti on this? Ah, here we go. So this sort of closed up fist presented, it's called a Musti hand, and Musti means steadiness, grasping the hair, holding things, wrestling. Let's have another one. Sikara, is that here? Yes, so this one here, which is sort of that, the Sikara hand, that means the god of love, who's called Madan, a bow, a pillar, silence, husband, tooth, entering, questioning, the body saying no, which is odd because in the West that means yes, recollection, intimate suggestion, untying the girdle, embrace, lover, letting fly, sakti and tamara weapons, sound of a bell pounding. So, as I say, I don't know what any of these mean when I go to watch a performance of Indian dance, but I appreciate that they are ostensibly telling a story which is one step more accessible than, say, ballet, even though the stories in ballet are a lot more simple. So that's dance. And music, well, it's not a book about my favourite performer. One of my favourite performers, and I'll put up a photo. This guy is called Blixer Bargeld, who is a German singer and guitarist from the band Einsturzende Neubauten, who are a sort of industrial band. They sort of play sort of metal or found objects, and they played on the side of a German U-Bahn or whatever they're called. And he gets mentioned in Paul Beatty's Slumberland, where the character in this goes and hangs out in Berlin and one day spots Blixer Bargeld and a Chinese female companion. Japanese female companion. So not a whole book about Blixer, but, you know, it's the best I could do. 11, visual arts. Do you have a favourite visual artist or media type? Do the two relate? Are there any books that address this relationship between artist and medium? Well, I don't understand that. Are there any books that address this relationship between artist and medium? But anyway, just sticking on the artist part. So I recently finished this book, Optic Nerve, which is about a lot of artists, including including Mark Rothko, who's my favourite artist, and a very good piece on Mark Rothko it is too. Okay, so brief addendum, I missed out one of the prompts, which was prompt 7. Literature does not have a universally accepted definition. What is yours? Well, again, I'm only talking fiction. I mean, literature does include non-fiction, but for the purposes of this, I've gone words creatively and imaginatively forged into narratives. And that's narratives, not stories, please note, and also both shades of meaning of the word forged. There you have it. Thanks to Richardson Reads and particularly to Elizabeth at Bookish North. That was my reading the Humanities Tag. Thanks very much. Till next time.